Good morning, students. This is Mr. Quintana from G. Holmes Braddock Senior High School in Miami, Florida. This is our review video for Units 1 and 2 of the AP exam this year. I hope all of you are doing well. I know this is a difficult time for you and your families as we are sheltered at home due to the coronavirus outbreak. I wanted to provide students some updates regarding the AP exam this year. The College Board released an announcement last week in terms of the exam. The exam will no longer be a written exam. Instead, it'll be an online exam. That means that students will be able to take the exam either on their computers, on their tablets, or on their smartphone devices. They'll be able to take the exam in this format, even if they're at home having to be sheltered due to the virus outbreak. Students will be able to take their exam in a online format. Again, they can be able to take the exam either on their tablets, computers, or smartphone devices. At the same time, we also know that the exam will be a 45-minute exam. It will be a written exam. That means that it will not have multiple choice questions this year. The exam will be written, so that means that either SAQ questions will be given or long essay questions will be given. We don't know which exact questions will be given as of yet. The College Board will make another update announcement on April 3rd regarding the written format of the test. But as of right now, the only certainty we do know about the exam is that it will be a 45-minute exam. It'll be a written exam. That means that you will type your answers online, either on a tablet, smartphone, or on a computer device. Students will also be given the option of writing their answers and uploading images onto their tablets, computers, or smartphone devices for the exam. And again, this will be an exam given either in the month of May or June. We don't know yet the date of the exam. The College Board plans on releasing an update on April 3rd, specifying the type of writing that students will be doing on their devices. And they will also specify the dates that the exam will be given. This situation is very fluid right now. There could be a lot of changes that may happen from the time that I'm giving this announcement right now to students all the way to April 3rd when the College Board will give their other update. So I just want students to be patient and flexible. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me through my Edmodo or Remind account in terms of the exam format. But again, as of right now, it is a 45-minute exam that will be online, and students will either type their answers or upload their written answers. And in terms of the format and in terms of the test dates, we're still waiting to hear from the College Board as to when and what format of the writing it will be. And that is basically in terms of the updates that I wanted to share with students. Now, the actual content regarding the exam will cover from Units 1 all the way to Unit 6. That means that the exam will cover from the year 1200. That means it'll cover from the time of the Middle Ages in 1200 all the way to the year 1900. And that means that it will cover a total of 6 units, Units 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And it will cover, again, from the Middle Ages all the way to the year 1900, which is right around the time of imperialism. I'm going to do my best to share videos with you and lectures regarding the different units. I know we have covered Units 1 and 2 in depth, so I intend to spend a few days with you guys reviewing all of those units with you guys in terms of the exam so that we have a refresher in terms of the content. Then we will proceed to Units 3, 4, 5, and 6, and we'll be receiving some more in-depth lecture and some in-depth discussion on that. These videos will be posted again on YouTube on my channel. You can feel free to view them as many times as you need to, and you can pose questions to me in terms of any of the information that I'm covering, either through Edmodo or Remind. So let's go ahead and get started. Units 1 and 2, as you could tell, cover the years 1200 to around 1450 AD. This period is known as the Middle Ages in world history, as we know. And we're going to focus our first part of the review on this area of the world, which many of you should be able to recognize. This area of the world is in Asia. This is known as the Middle East. The Middle East also goes by a few other names. It's known as Southwest Asia, also known as the Near East. But on the AP exam, you'll probably see this region known commonly as the Middle East. And the religion that we're going to focus on during these 2 units is going to be the religion of Islam. Islam had its origins in this area right here in the Middle East, known as Arabia. And the primary focus that we're going to look at is on the cities of Mecca and on Medina as well. So the Middle East is, again, where the religion of Islam started. Now, the people that lived in Arabia were known as the Arabs. They were a nomadic people that were pastoralists or herders. They were able to get food by herding animals such as sheep and goats through the Arabian desert area. Now, these Bedouins, also known as Arabs, beside being herders, many of them were also merchants. So they would trade along caravan routes all through the Middle Eastern area of Arabia up to the area of Syria. And as we also know, the Silk Road starts all the way over here in the area of China. It's going to go through Central Asia, and the Silk Road will eventually end here in the area of the Middle East, primarily in the area that we see here, Syria, and down here in Palestine. So these trade routes that the Bedouin Arabs are trading on connect directly to the north along the Silk Road. Now, some of the major ideas that I want students to focus in terms of Islam is that Islam is a monotheistic religion. That means that Muslims believed in one God. Now, the religion of Islam is heavily influenced by the religions of Judaism and Christianity. In fact, many of the stories and many of the beliefs that Muslims follow are based on Jewish and Christian beliefs originally. Now, the followers of Islam are commonly known as Muslims, and their main leader and prophet that they follow was known as Muhammad. Now, many of the individuals that we see that appear in the Bible that Jews and Christians believe in and follow, such as individuals such as Moses, Jesus, and Abraham, these individuals that we find in the Bible, Muslims also believe in, but they believe them to be prophets. Muhammad is seen as the last and ultimate prophet for Muslims. And they believe that Muhammad, again, is a prophet. They do not believe that Muhammad is a Messiah or a son of God. They believe simply that he is a prophet. Now, Muslims believe that the only deity that they have is Allah. Allah is their God, and Allah is simply the Arabic word for God. Muslims also have their holy book that is known as the Quran. Please don't refer to the Quran as the Muslim Bible. The moment we call it a Muslim Bible, we're making it sound like a Christian book. We like to commonly refer to all different scriptures and texts that people follow in their religions as holy books. So for Muslims, their holy book is the Quran, and there's two spellings for it. One spelling of the Quran starts with the letter Q. The other spelling of the Quran starts with the letter K. Either words are correct to be used. And again, for Muslims, their holy book is the Quran. Muslims also believe that the ultimate way that they can be saved and go to heaven is through their submission to God. In fact, the word Islam, it basically means submission to God. Muslims believe that if they submit to God, that they will be able to enter into paradise or heaven. The 5 major beliefs that Muslims follow are the ones that we see here. These are known as the 5 pillars of Islam. The reason why they're called pillars is that these beliefs are meant to hold up the religion much the same way as pillars hold up a building. And these pillars hold up their belief or their religion. The 5 major beliefs, we start off with the first one being belief or shahadateen. Muslims believe that there is only one God and that Muhammad is their messenger or prophet. Notice how this belief pillar is the very first one. It just shows how strongly monotheistic Muslim people are, how strongly they believe in one God, in that they make this their first pillar. The second pillar is prayer or salah. Muslims have to pray 5 times a day. Remember, the way that they know that they have to pray is that the muezzin or prayer caller climbs to the top of the tower known as the minaret. He does the prayer call from there, which alerts Muslims to begin the process of prayer where they have to ritually wash themselves. And then they take their prayer rugs out and they begin the ritual of praying during this time period. And again, they pray 5 times a day this way. The third pillar is known as charity or zakah. So Muslims are expected to give a portion of their wealth to help the poor. The fourth pillar of Islam is known as fasting or siyam. So during the month of Ramadan, Muslims have to abstain from eating food or drinking from the time of sunrise to sunset during this month of fasting known as the month of Ramadan. Now, this month changes every year. Sometimes Ramadan might be in the spring, summer, fall, or winter. The hardest times to do Ramadan are normally during the summer months because of the prolonged days of sunlight out. So during the time when the sun is out, Muslims have to abstain from food and drink. So summer months are always the most challenging for Muslims during Ramadan. Winter Ramadan months are always the easiest because there's less time hours that they have to fast. The fifth pillar is known as pilgrimage or Hajj. So this is when Muslims are expected to, at least once in their lifetime, they have to go on pilgrimage to Mecca. The only exception to the rule in terms of Muslims not having to go on pilgrimage is those Muslims that are either too poor to do the trip, or those Muslims that are physically not able to do the trip, or that they're sick and they can't do the trip. This is the prayer call. We've played this in class for students to be able to hear in the past. You're free to take a look at it and read the words. But more than anything else, I want you to notice the very beginning of the prayer call. God is great. God is great. I bear witness that there is no divinity but God. I bear witness that Muhammad is God's messenger. What does this basically correlate to? The first pillar of Islam. Muslims strongly believe in one God and that Muhammad is their prophet. This is the hallmark of the first pillar of the 5 pillars of Islam. And the fact that it shows up on their prayer call reinforces the fact that they are monotheistic and believe in one God. Now, Muhammad is their main prophet. He grew up in the city of Mecca. He grew up as an orphan raised by his uncle. Now, his uncle started out as a merchant, so Muhammad was also raised as a merchant. And through various trips up to the area of Syria, Muhammad was exposed to the religions of that area. Many people believe that through his exposure through trade, he may have been influenced by the monotheism beliefs of Judaism and Christianity. Needless to say, the main belief that Muslims have is that when Muhammad was fasting around the age of 40 in a cave out in the Arabian desert, he believed that the angel Gabriel spoke to him through the angel Gabriel speaking to him. God was basically revealing his words to him. These words that Gabriel spoke to him about were the words that would end up being the words transmitted into the holy book, the Quran. He was in this cave for a period of around 40 days, where he received, again, the word of God through the angel Gabriel. When he returned back to the city of Mecca, where he grew up in, he spread the word to his wife, to his family members and friends. Those were his first early supporters in converting to this new belief of Islam. Muhammad himself, early on, and many of the other individuals in Medina and in Mecca and Arabia were polytheistic. So this was a revolutionary idea that Muhammad was spreading. The fact that he was saying that there was only one God was something that took many of the people of Mecca aback. Only his family and immediate friends were his supporters at first. His supporters were attacked for their beliefs in one God, and he was forced to flee to the city of Medina in the year 622 CE. Eventually, he was able to gain more followers in Medina, and by the year 630, he returned with an army of followers where he was able to take the city of Mecca by force. And at that point, he was able to spread the religion of Islam through both the cities of Medina and Mecca. One of the first things he did when he entered into the city of Mecca after conquering it was he destroyed many of the pagan shrines. And one of those shrines, the Kaaba, he converted it into the major focal point of Muslims to pray at. It became essentially a Muslim temple. So these are just some images that I wanted to share with you all. On the right, we see an image of what Muhammad would have looked like. Again, this is an image of Muhammad during the time of the 600s. And the two cities that we see here is this city on the bottom right is the city of Jerusalem. So part of Muslims in their history that they also believe is that Muhammad went on a night journey from the city of Mecca to Jerusalem, and he traveled there on a Pegasus. And on this Pegasus, once he arrived in Jerusalem, he prayed at this site, which is known as the Temple Mount. Eventually, Muhammad remounted onto the Pegasus, flew to heaven, where he received further revelations from God. And again, this site here in Jerusalem marks the site of where Muhammad did the night journey on the Pegasus from Jerusalem here all the way to heaven. And what we're seeing here now is a map of how Islam spread. Notice early on, during Muhammad's lifetime, he was able to spread Islam throughout the peninsula of Arabia. Eventually, through the other leaders of Islam, the religion spread beyond into the area of Iraq over here in Mesopotamia, further on to Persia, the rest of Arabia down here, and then on to North Africa here into Egypt. By the time the Umayyad caliphs took power, they also spread Islam into the area of Afghanistan here in Central Asia, as well as to the west over here, to the area of Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, and eventually we see Islam entering into the Iberian Peninsula here in Spain. So this is the Kaaba, the focus point of all Muslims. This is where they pray when they go on pilgrimage to Mecca. All these little dots that you see here, these are all Muslims praying around the Kaaba. And here we see a typical image of how Muslims pray 5 times a day. And again, this modern image is of Muslims that are in pilgrimage in Mecca. Notice how they come very close to the Kaaba. It is a sacred spot for Muslims. This was the temple that Muhammad took over when he conquered the city. He turned it into a pagan shrine and turned it into a center of their belief in Islam. And here we see Muslims as they start chanting and parading around the area of the Kaaba here in Mecca. And this is the inside of the Kaaba. They only open it, the building up once a year to clean the inside. Again, it is such a sacred place that they only open the building once a year. And here we see a typical image of a muezzin, a prayer caller. The muezzin or prayer caller, he sings out the chant 5 times a day known as the azan. The azan is the prayer call that tells Muslims that they have to stop what they're doing in their day and begin the ritual of praying. And this impressive image is an image of Mecca at night. Notice all of those dots that you see there. Those are all Muslims who are engaging in prayer there in Mecca. Now, we know that Mecca is the holiest city for Muslims, but what other cities are considered holy by Muslims as well? Well, the second holiest city is Medina. That is the city that Muhammad fled to when he was attacked by the polytheistic people of Mecca early on when he tried to spread the religion. And the third holiest city for Muslims is Jerusalem. By the way, Jerusalem is not only a holy city for Muslims, it's also holy for Jews. Jews built their ancient capital in Jerusalem. It is the ancient capital of the Jewish kingdom. And it is also a holy city for Christians. Jerusalem is the site where Jesus was crucified, and it was also the site where Jesus resurrected. And again, the 3 holy cities for Muslims are Mecca number 1, Medina number 2, and Jerusalem number 3. Now, Muhammad's father-in-law, Abu Bakr, takes over and becomes the leader for Muslims after Muhammad passes away. Now, the title that Abu Bakr takes is the title of Caliph. The title of Caliph simply means successor. So Abu Bakr was the successor to Muhammad. And who was Abu Bakr ruling over? Well, he was ruling over the Islamic community of followers known as the Ummah. So Abu Bakr's main job was to kind of keep all of the Muslims together as a group. How did he do this? He became the head of their empire. He became a general or military commander. He was the chief judge for all Muslims. He was also the religious leader for Muslims. He is responsible for compiling and editing the Quran, which becomes the Muslim holy book for Muslims. And he also reestablishes Muslim authority over the entire community. So what is the caliph really like as a ruler? He's kind of a combination of an emperor and a religious leader. Think of the caliph almost like a king and a pope kind of all wrapped in one. That's really what the caliph is. He's both a secular political leader and a religious leader at the same time. So what sort of government does a caliph rule over as an Islamic government? Well, the Islamic Empire itself was a theocracy. A theocracy is a government that is ruled by religion. So essentially, the caliph, it was believed, was guided by God to rule over the Muslim population. And these first four caliphs were Abu Bakr, Omar, Uthman, and Ali. So the Umayyads were the first Muslim empire. They were established at around 750 AD from a branch of families that ruled over the area of the Middle East, North Africa, and Spain. The Umayyads ruled for about 100 years, and their power extended all over the Middle East again, North Africa, and Spain. The capital of the Umayyad Empire was in Damascus, while the spiritual center was in Mecca. The official language of the Muslim population was Arabic, and the main currency used were gold and silver coins. Now, people that were conquered by the Muslims were encouraged to convert. They were not forced to convert, but were encouraged to convert. Now, one of the ways that the Muslims were able to gain leverage on these populations by encouraging them to convert was by making many of the Christians and Jews that were conquered pay a tax. So in other words, if you were Christian or Jewish and you wanted to keep your religion in the Umayyad Empire, you had to pay a jizya or a tax to keep your faith. Many Christians and Jews simply converted as a way of not having to pay the tax, but if they wanted to keep their religion, then they had to pay the jizya or a tax. Now, eventually rebellions did start forming by the year 750, and they were overthrown by this point in time. Charles Martel was the Frankish leader. He is the person that is responsible for stopping the Muslims expanding their religion into the rest of Europe. So by the time the Muslim Empire collapses in 750 under the Umayyads, they have extended their power all the way from Afghanistan all the way to Spain. Again, this is what the Umayyad Caliphate looks like. Notice it extended from Afghanistan all through Persia, Mesopotamia, Syria, Palestine, all of Arabia here, Egypt, North Africa, and into Spain. Charles Martel was the leader of the Franks here in France, and he stopped the invasion of the Umayyads that were coming into France during this time. So the Umayyad Caliphate only lasts for about 100 years in this territory that we see that's all purple here, from 650 AD to around 750 AD. Now, by the time the fourth caliph ended up being overthrown, we start noticing that there was a split in Islam. Now, the two major branches of Islam are the Sunnis and the Shiites. The Sunnis believe that the first three caliphs were correctly chosen. They also believe that the leader of Muslims should be someone that's chosen from a broad base of people in the Islamic community. The Shiites, on the other hand, believe that all of the caliphs in the future should be from Ali's bloodline. Now, why was Ali so special for Muslims as a person? He was the son-in-law of Muhammad. So if Ali was to be the caliph, anybody that was succeeding after Ali that came from Ali's blood, since he was the son-in-law of Muhammad, he would also be coming from Muhammad's bloodline as well. So again, the Shiites wanted all leaders to be from Ali's bloodline, while the Sunnis believe that they should choose someone that was competent from the Islamic community. Most Muslims in the world today are Sunni Muslims that form 85% of the population, while 15% of the Muslims in the world are Shiites. Sunnis pray 5 times a day, while Shiites combine their prayers and they only pray 3 times a day. Sunnis pray on a prayer mat, while Shiites, they pray on a hard piece of clay. But again, the main part of the debate is over leadership. This was a political separation between Muslims. Sunnis believed, again, that they should be able to choose who the caliph is, while Shiites believe that it should be from Ali's bloodline. Some of the major advancements among the Muslims were the following. Muslims believed that they made advancements in medicine. These beliefs in medicine were revolutionary at the time period. While the Europeans were still somewhat backwards in their approach when it came to medicine, they were practicing such barbaric practices as bloodletting, while Muslims were advancing much faster in terms of their study of the human body. Muslims believed very much in the contagious nature of diseases. They believed diseases such as tuberculosis were contagious, and that the only way you could stop the spread of diseases is through quarantining. This is something that is very pertinent in our societies today, as you know, with the coronavirus spreading. One of the common methods that we could stop diseases like the coronavirus and other diseases like the flu throughout history, as well as diseases like tuberculosis, were by quarantining people, by separating them from the population. If you keep a person separated, they won't essentially infect others. And this was a discovery made by Muslim doctors and scientists. Some of the other major advancements among Muslims was in the field of astronomy. Muslims studied the stars, they studied the moon, they studied the sun, and they did this study of astronomy as a way of aiding them in their study of their own religion of Islam. Their prayers that they do 5 times a day are based on the lunar calendar. So for Muslims to gain a better understanding of when to pray, they had to study astronomy, and they had to study the cycles of the moon and the stars for that matter. And in the pursuit of astronomy and in the study of it, Muslims also built some of the first observatories in world history. Observatories were normally built on tops of mountains or elevated areas to be able to observe the stars better. Muslims also advanced in algebra and in trigonometry in terms of mathematics. This will also aid in the design of architecture that Muslims also excelled in. And Muslims also made huge advancements in art. Now, their art was of a style known as arabesque. Part of their artwork is that they cannot portray any human or animal figures in their art. It's considered idolatry against the belief in one God. So instead, they do their art known as arabesque, which is an abstract form of art, which doesn't represent any humans or animals. Muslims also made advancements in technology such as the windmill, and they also introduced various new crops into Europe. Because Muslims controlled Spain in Europe, they were able to introduce such crops as almonds, citrus fruits like oranges, sugar, coffee. All of these products were introduced into Europe through Muslims and their control of Spain. Here we notice Muslim markets known as the souks. These are where many of those goods along the Silk Road entered into the Middle East from. What we notice on the top right is the astrolabe. This was used as a way of navigating ships and travelers being able to use the stars to be able to navigate. And here we see an image of the very important Muslim doctor Muhammad al-Razi, who writes one of the first medical encyclopedias. Now, what about women and Islam? So women essentially had many rights under Islam. Women could divorce. They essentially had the right to divorce. If a man divorced his wife, he had to return the dowry back to his wife. So essentially, if a family divorced, right, if husband and wife divorced, the dowry had to be returned back to the wife. Now, what is the dowry? It's normally the gift that's given to the new couple when they first get married by the bride's father. So it is a form of wealth that was used to start up a family. And again, during the time of a divorce, the man was required to give to his wife the dowry returned back to her. Muslim women also had the right to own property, and they also had the right to retain it in marriage. Muslim women also had the right to remarry. So let's say, for example, their husband died and they became a widow. Muslim women had the right to remarry after. Muslim women also had the right to testify in court as a witness in trials. And Muslim women also were allowed to go on pilgrimage to Mecca. In the religion of Islam, infanticide is prohibited. So there is no abortion. It is not allowed in Islam. It is prohibited. Now, one of the main role models for Muslim women was a woman known as Khadija. Khadija was Muhammad's wife. She was a role model. She was a successful businesswoman. So many Muslim women aspired to be like Khadija. Now, even though Muslim women had more rights compared to societies in Europe and in East Asia, such as in China and Japan, Islam was still very much a patriarchal religion and a patriarchal society. Men practiced polygamy. That means that they could have and marry more than one wife. In fact, Muslim men could have up to 4 wives in their religion. Now, women had to be faithful only to one man, while men could have up to 4 wives. Legally, a woman's testimony in court was half the weight of a man's, and women were also forced to go through certain dress restrictions. That means that in various Muslim areas, Muslim had to be veiled out in public. And women's role in society was always to be loyal, to care for their husband and their family. So here we see an image of Islamic women. Notice how they're veiled. They're wearing the hijab, which is the head covering or headscarf around their head. This was shown as a way of being modest out in public. Notice here we see Muslim women also wearing the niqab, which only allows their eyes to be shown. And then in the most restrictive Muslim societies, Muslim women had to wear what is known as the full burqa. So in our next lesson, we'll be doing feudalism in Europe. I hope you guys enjoyed this small part of our presentation on units 1 and 2 on Islam. Again, our next lesson will be on Europe. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to me. Send me a message on Enmodo and Remind. Have a great day.